So hi everyone, this is Blake Anderson and I'm a registered social worker and therapist here in Toronto, Ontario. And I have over 14 years of collective experience as a registered social worker and 5 years as a therapist. In this video, I want to cover aspects of a narcissistic mother, particularly with either a son or a daughter and that relationship, and just aspects of the narcissistic mother and how that relationship growing up in that family of origin, how it can be incredibly difficult for the son or the daughter, particularly when forming their own independence and also their own relationships in the future or as an adult. So I recently watched an interview with Sam Vaknin and with Marie, this psychologist, and they delved into aspects of her relationship with her mother and what she explored and understood about her mother and aspects of narcissism. Sam Vaknin did some great clarifications in that video that I think would be helpful for the listener to just understand this dynamic and how it shows up, particularly for the son and the daughter. And so the beginning of the conversation, they talk about the notion of how Marie, the interviewer, the psychologist, was just asking about feeling this void with her mother, this emptiness, nothing there really. For people who have been on the receiving end of a narcissistic mother, when they confront who they're dealing with, I think they very much have the experience of glimpsing this void, this emptiness, like yelling into a void and there's no one there. That's definitely the situation for a narcissistic mother, is this emptiness, this void. You talk into this void and it's like nothing's there, right? Sam Vaknin talks about how that void gets projected onto the son or daughter. He talks about a dead mother. A narcissist is a dead mother, and they need to convert you first as an internal. They can't allow you to be an independent being. A healthy mother would allow the son or daughter to differentiate and become their own independent son and daughter. And that's a healthy aspect of a mother. But in a dead mother, and he talks about there can be many dead mothers. It's not just narcissism or a not good enough mother. But in terms of a narcissistic mother, there's the notion of the gaze, right? So they look to the child and look at the child. And it's another clarification in this interview. The psychologist believes that a daughter and maybe a son needs to be seen. That's a fundamental trauma that occurred for the daughter and the mother. Sam makes a slight clarification. It's not that the mother doesn't see the child, but rather that the gaze is wrong and it's unhealthy gaze. And so what he, I think, means by that is the notion that the narcissist sees the daughter and yet converts them into the dead object to make them an interject into them. As a narcissist, everybody's just an extension of them, and they convert you into a snapshot or an internalized interject. He talks about, though, that this isn't a live aspect that's like alive in the narcissist, but rather it's like a ghost-like admiration, and there's a depth to it. So it's a very much minimized and subjugated part that is interjected. So the mother creates an internal object by first introducing death to the son or daughter and sacrifices them at a very young age. The narcissist has a false self. So the false self as a deity converts all those around them. It's like a death cult, introduces death to them and converts them into an internal object of that narcissist. And so that's also the notion of entitlement. A narcissistic mother, when you glimpse this emptiness and you start calling them out on how they're not perfect and they're not always a good mother, they don't agree with you, and they're very much entitled to believe that their presence in your life and their ability to just be in your life and to be in your presence is something that you should have gratitude and appreciative of. And so they don't think there's anything wrong with them. And they believe that if you're rejecting them or having any oppositional to them as an independent object or just an independent person, they take that as an affront to their perfection and this sense that they're all perfect. They need to reject you and see you as either dumb because you don't understand their greatness, or some kind of a bad son or daughter, or perhaps even evil. They need to punish you and ensure that you get in line. And so they could maybe financially abuse you. Maybe they don't give you inheritance, or they find ways to smear your name, all in the sense that you're not to be an independent being from them with your own sense of family or friends, but it has to be their agenda. The narcissistic mother will look at you and give you attention but only as an extension of them. They don't see you in terms of your own intrinsic value as a son or daughter, but rather as an extension of them. And I recently watched a movie, Shine, which actually is a good movie that looks into this dynamic where there's a narcissistic father and he very much sees his son as an extension of him. And so he won't allow the son to differentiate and become an independent person with regards to his piano playing. And so it's a good movie to watch in terms of understanding this dynamic. Obviously, it's between a father and a son, but you could also understand that similarly with a mother, in the sense that the mother doesn't want you to differentiate and become your own separate self. Rather, they'll introduce death to you. And that's why it's a pathology. They're converting you into a dead object. If you're spending too much time around them and allow them to do this to you, then it's going to shorten your life. It's going to undermine your immune system. It's going to undermine your relationships because according to the mother, that you're just an extension of them. And so everything has to basically go through them in terms of how you live your life. And so that's why if you truly have a narcissistic mother, you really have to go no contact and heal from this, because to them, you're just an extension of them. And this is why it's very tricky to have any sense of accountability for them, because if you're not going along with them, you're challenging them as this not perfect mother, right? And because narcissists, they split, right? So this infantile defense in which they split you into a good object or a bad object. And if you're rejecting them as not perfect or you're questioning their false self, then they very much are convinced that you're a bad object. And so this is where the scapegoating occurs and where they will probably see you as being evil or at least a bad son or daughter. And they'll likely convince the siblings against you that you are this, and also just family, friends, and other people. And because mothers have a lot of cachet in society, and there's this sense of allure that their mothers are to be valued and have almost a spiritual quality to them, right? Because they give birth and give life. They can very easily, in that dynamic, especially if they're covert and perhaps a communal narcissist, they can very much pull out the heartstrings of others to be a victim and to make you out to be the bad one and spread lies about your name. From a very early part of their own life, they created a false self and died to this false self as a child. And then as an older adult, when they have a child, such as yourself, Sam Vaknin talks about that from a very early age, they sacrifice you to this false self. And so it's very much in terms of a journey about how do you overcome this. I mentioned going no contact as a first step, but a second step is to know that you almost need a miracle to overcome what occurred to you from a very young age. Because this was in your subject in terms of a child, you internalize this likely from a young age. And it's likely the case that you just wanted to have a healthy, loving relationship with your mother, but it was all just superficial, and you were just an extension of them. There really wasn't a relationship there. In terms of post-traumatic growth, it's working on those core beliefs and early situations that likely showed up for you. In some sense, this dead mother has been internalized in you. It's not only that you're a void, they projected this void onto you, so you're just this empty vessel. So you're to be seen but not heard. You should have a lot of gratitude that you're just in their presence because they have this greatness. And not only are you a void, but you're also a negative void, and you're put down as a bad object. You've internalized that likely, and it's likely the case that you've repeated that in a repetition compulsion within your own romantic relationships and maybe in your friendships and work environments, because from a very young age, that's what you were convinced you were. And so the question is, usually you have to be a dead object, so you also maybe played low in your life and you subjugated yourself to your mother because you were taught that's the way that you get love. And so you walked around the world as almost like a dead person in some sense, and probably go to the agenda of your mother. And obviously there's some variety and differences of everyone, but it's just to maybe know that you are playing out. This goes back to Freud, and that there's a Thanos principle. The narcissist introduces death to all those around them. The only way you can be in cohabitation with your family or your mother is by being an extension of her and going along with her agenda. That's not having your own independence. They see you as an empty vessel, and you're to be appreciative of them, and you're not to question their agenda and their perfection. And if you do, you get sidelined and projected upon as a bad object, and they'll smear your name. When you confront them, you realize you're dealing with a black hole, an empty person. Usually the first aspect of the false self is this child part, this needing child. Maybe for so many years you were programmed and trained to comfort this child part in them because they want to repeat their childhood, their unowned material onto you. You see this child and you want to help this child. A lot of this is subconscious. It's not something you're always seeing. But if you understand that and you glimpse that, you're seeing this void, this emptiness, and then you're seeing this child part, this needing child. And then as an impulse in you, you want to reach out and comfort that child. But you realize that also is weaponized, and that's something you can't heal or do for your mother. And so they'll also probably use that false self and that child part to manipulate you. A lot of this is unconscious. They're not consciously doing this, and they would never admit to this. But these are the core aspects of what you see, a lot of this entitlement and the sense that they're better than, and that should be appreciative of just simply being in their presence. So in this video, I just wanted to talk about aspects of this interview I watched with Sam Vaknin and Marie that interviewed him, and ways in which this notion of a dead mother and how they put a gaze on their son or their daughter, and they see the daughter and the son, but only as this empty vessel for an extension of them, and how incredibly hurtful and painful this can be for the scapegoat or the son or the daughter, especially as they become adults and maybe have their own family or friends. But until they really address a lot of this internalization and the limited beliefs of this dead mother in them, or this overly critical mother, it's going to be hard for them to move forward in their life. So that's just to understand that questioning these limited beliefs, doing your own inner work in terms of maybe going to a therapist, addressing these aspects of growing up with this not good enough mother and how you're emotionally starved from a very young age. And also introduced death to you from a very young age. So that's why when you have a relationship that you start or a friendship, that is seen as a threat to this dead mother. When you have a girlfriend or boyfriend or a husband or a wife or like a friend that really supportive of you, that is seen as giving life to your life. They don't want that. The same way with that movie I was mentioning in Shine, he wants him to be great in terms of a piano player, but only in the light of him as the father, not to go off to school or university to become independent, to shine on their own. So in this video, I talked about core aspects of a narcissistic mother and how this shows up in relationships in terms of the core relationship you have with your mother. And so if you like this video, please hit subscribe. Thanks and have a great day.